If you stop working within the system, you stop extracting fiat currency, and unless you have a charitable situation that you can fall back on, you are going to starve, or freeze, or dehydrate. Your life expectancy is going to shrink. And that is in essence what In Time is telling us. In the end, we recognize that this is not actually a film about the future. This is a film about our lives today, with all the fluff taken away. So the movie I'm going to critique today, going to draw analysis from, is In Time by Andrew Niccol. Now, it was released in 2011, and I saw it on an aeroplane, I remember distinctly, on a flight to London in 2012. At that time, what was happening in my life was I was prospecting. I was looking for answers to why we behave the way we behave and how to change it, how to change our behavior collectively, everybody, to put us on a more harmonious, sustainable, egalitarian course towards a brighter future. So this film, In Time, puts forward a vision of the future that is not too far into the future, and it starts off with a line, "We don't have time to worry about how it happened, but we are genetically modified to stop aging at 25. The problem is, after that, we only have 1 year left to live, unless we can earn more time." That's a very intriguing concept. And at first I thought it's a bit of a cop-out saying we don't have time to explain. But then one must remember that Andrew Niccol is also the author and director of GATTACA, in which genetic modification is explored. Now, the interesting thing about Niccol is that he is prescient. He released GATTACA in 1997. At that time, human genetic modification was but a wild shot in the dark in the far distant sci-fi future. It's now not even 30 years later, I think it was in 2020, when CRISPR was developed, and in which the scientists, I believe, also got a Nobel Prize. It was also just in the last few years that a Chinese scientist went against all current norms and in fact produced 3 children that had been genetically modified. So back in 1997, the critics of GATTACA were, "Oh, well, it's very stylized and very good to look at, but the premise is a bit far-fetched and, it really doesn't provoke much excitement." Interestingly, he then went on in 2002 to make a film called Simone, in which he creates a scenario in which a director creates a virtual actress. And the critics at the time had the same sort of, that's rather far-fetched, and, it's pretty boring, and so on. I mean, who is going to fall for this? And here we are, in 2023, in fact, so 21 years after Niccol wrote and directed this film, the idea of virtual actors, deep fake, is an absolute reality. I think we need to start taking the visions, the futuristic visions of Andrew Niccol a little more seriously. We make a big fuss about James Cameron's huge sort of splashy movies and so on, but the odds of that happening in the near future are nil. But the odds of what Andrew Niccol is making films about clearly are very high for happening in the near future. So In Time presents itself as a futuristic dystopian film in which, as I said, the people are genetically modified to age up to 25, which is very disconcerting in the film. And it makes for these strange sort of Freudian moments in which the son and the mother look as if they could be lovers, and where the daughter and the mother-in-law, in other words, the daughter, the mother, and the grandmother are all the same age, clearly 25. A bizarre concept. The film, as is usual with Niccol's films, is beautifully stylized. The colors are pared down through plummy reds and olive greens are framed in an austere black charcoal and cream. Good to look at. Appeals to my sense of aesthetics. And the thing that stands out, and the reason why I'm critiquing this film particularly, is this neon green digitized clock that ticks down not just the hours, minutes, seconds, but literally nanoseconds. So you can see exactly how much time you have left to live. It makes paying attention to what you're doing and prioritizing an everyday event. As the hero of the film says, you tend not to sleep in. I personally like the very smart, short, sharp one-liners. It sort of ties in with this whole thing that we don't have time to have great big soliloquies. Say what you've got to say it as precisely as you can, get the message across, move on. So, incredibly well-constructed film. But in the end, nothing changes. In the end, we recognize that this is not actually a film about the future. This is a film about our lives today, with all the fluff taken away. We go out and we do something and we earn some money and so on, and we have this whole economic cycle. What it is nothing but time, your lifetime, that you are selling into the system in order to earn some fiat currency so that you can buy yourself some food or some shelter so that you can extend your lifetime a little more. If you stop working within the system, you stop extracting fiat currency, and unless you have a charitable situation that you can fall back on, you are going to starve, or freeze, or dehydrate. Your life expectancy is going to shrink. And that is in essence what In Time is telling us. It's not about the future. It's not about some dystopia that might happen one day. Niccol is telling us, this is your life today with all the fluff removed. This is how you're living, from day to day, trying to extract more time out of the system. And in the movie, what they do in order to extract more time out of the system is that they work in factories where they manufacture the very shackles of time that is imprisoning them. So the only way to earn more time is to create a stronger prison of time. The film then goes on, it becomes a sort of classic Bonnie and Clyde meets Robin Hood type situation. Amanda Seyfried is excellent in the role. You might remember her from Mamma Mia, in which she was vapid. But in this role, she was excellent. And she's clearly a favorite of Niccol, as she played in another film, which I forget at the moment. So, due to various circumstances, our hero is gifted an enormous amount of time, which allows him to travel through these time zones. And as he travels through the time zones, you recognize that going through these gates is so expensive on time that nobody in the ghettos, as they are called, could even begin to cross these time zones because they would be stone dead before they got through gate 2. Our hero has enough time, he gets to the other end, and he recognizes that there is masses of time. Time is infinite. It's just being controlled by the few, who have the saying, for the few to live forever or to be immortal, many must die. In this world of endless time, in which the people at the top of the pinnacle, in the promised land, control all time, they quote Darwinian evolution falsely. They frame the, quote, survival of the fittest as something Darwin said. It wasn't really something Darwin said. It was a favorite quote of the eugenists, those who used the Darwin theory of evolution to justify racism, separatism, them and us. We are higher up the evolutionary scale, therefore we are entitled to more. And in the case of the movie, more time. Time to be immortal, to live forever. Then, of course, the movie goes into the normal sort of American chase movie. I'm guessing that any sort of movie, action movie, has to have a chase scene and a car scene, and okay, fair enough. And then it's the bad guys and the good guys. And an actor that I have somehow come across in 3 now of the films that I have reviewed, critiqued, Cillian Murphy. Cillian Murphy plays an interesting role in this film, and it's also a role that is reflected in society. He is the gatekeeper, or the timekeeper. He keeps the system in control. He controls the system so it doesn't change. He is the middle class manager for the upper class. He was the one guy who escaped from the ghetto and is now working really, really hard to keep the status quo in place so that all his fellow ghetto livers must remain exactly where they are, in order that the system is maintained. The system of time. It's an economic system of time. The film showed me one thing. Technology is fleeting. Thought process is the thing that remains permanent. And this is true for our lives today. It doesn't matter how deeply you look into history. There are always those who think they are higher up the scale, more important than others. And those will take for themselves whatever the resource is at the moment. At the moment, we have a situation where the latest cohort of young males are rising through the ranks, and so we have Sam Altman making his play for power, wanting to raise $3 trillion to start the chip industry of the future. As news broadcasters say, chips are the new oil. And this is where the film, reality, and where I'm coming from intersect. As long as the thing that establishes value in society is something outside of us, something quantifiable outside of us, this hierarchy will never change. In the film In Time, you finally get to the end and you realize it's built on a false premise. Time cannot be quantified. It has no actual value except to the person whose time, lifetime, it is. So they don't control the time so much as, of course, the genetic clock. They have inserted something into the body that controls an intrinsically valuable thing in each person. And this is why this film came back to me as important. It was the clock. My own journey in time and the importance of time started back in 2006. I was traveling through Russia at the time, and I also stripped away, like in this movie, I stripped away all the fluff, all the unnecessary things, and in my case it was language and literacy and culture and custom and habits. All these things were stripped away, and I reached a point where I had no appointments, no television programs, no bus or train schedules to control my day. Clock time had lost all meaning for me. Also, by crossing a border, the time leaps backwards or forwards depending to which city the country orientates itself. In Russia, it was to Moscow. Here it is to Astana. At the border, time moved forward about 2 or 3 hours. So yesterday's border crossing actually cost me 6 hours in modern measured time. And so I literally lost 6 hours, or 3 hours at the border. But it made no real difference to me organically. It would have only made a difference had I had one of these genetically engineered clocks. Because time zones are merely a measuring stick and mean nothing in a timeless world. 1,000 years ago, Avicenna said that if nothing moved, there would be no time. But movement does not create time. Time was created to measure movement. There is no time. It does not pass. The changes we see are life passing, defined by chemical changes moving through their endless repeated cycles. In modern society, we have confused the issue, shifted the values, and time, like money, is no longer just a measurement. They have both become values to be measured themselves. In the modern world, time measures money, while money measures time, and value is nowhere to be found. So this was back in 2006, my year of beds, when I drove solo once around the world. Many things happened to my brain in that particular year and set me on this course that I find myself on today. And the course that it set me on is, I realized that in shedding this constraint of time, my brain was free to think about what truly has value within society. A couple of years later, I then traveled around the United States of America, where I once again came across this concept of time, which brings us closer to this idea of time being controlled, manipulated by technology. And my contention that Andrew Niccol's movie In Time is not reflecting a dystopian future. It is in fact reflecting today, just far closer to the bone. So I get in America, now I'm trying to figure out why we think and behave the way we do, and I get to Seattle, to Google land, and I entitle this particular chapter, Time Bandits. So what I say here is time is spinning out of control. The faster our time-saving technology allows us to work, the more we can do. And due to the default efficiency mode in the cold climate mental language, the more we think we must do. We hold up our lack of time as proof of our relevance in the world. In a superior voice, we say, "Oh, I'm far too busy. I have absolutely no time to spare." And if you think of that in terms of the metaphor that Andrew Niccol is showing us in time, you can see how false that idea is. Ironically, in an economic model in which scarcity confers value, this does not apply to our personal time. In our economic system, human labor hours, or our lives, are nothing but a commodity. As machines fill more and more labor hours, a glut of human labor hours has resulted, and so human time continues to lose value, and we get more and more desperate. Now, back in 2016, in which I wrote this book, I was referring really just to these social media platforms that were not just data mines, but also time mines. But today, with artificial intelligence taking over every single aspect of our intellectual life. Now, we were promised by all these people who raised huge amounts of funds and by their public relations machines, we were promised that artificial intelligence would take over the drudgery of life. But we see the reality now of Andrew Niccol's Simone. Artificial intelligence, because it was created within the internet, within an intellectual sphere, clearly is only taking over intellectual life. It is stealing our words, our songs, our melodies, our faces, and converting them into new objects of art, of which we are told the copyright now belongs to those who own the technology. In time is our life today. So I go on to say, the current dramatic increase in income disparity is grounded in time. The economy is split into two kinds of people: those whose earnings are limited by the amount of time they personally have in which to earn a living, and those who have no such restriction, as their earnings are leveraged by the time of others. When you strip away all the economic hubris, wealth has always been built on the leveraging of the time of others. The most profitable form of this type of leverage is called slavery, in which the labor hours, or the lives, of others are simply stolen. During the Industrial Revolution, the industrialists discovered that with machines they could distance themselves from this morally dubious practice, while simultaneously multiplying their time leverage, thereby increasing their production and their wealth, without having to increase their investment in human time or society. And that's an important point. When we look at what is happening today with these huge data platforms and these huge information technology companies, they are shedding human employees daily by the thousands, even as AI is taking over all of those jobs. These companies are making a massive profit, even as people who thought they were safe from the ravages of this technology because they helped create it. If you listen to my critique of Oppenheimer, the movie, you will see that back in his day it was exactly the same. Nothing has changed. The technology has changed. The thought process within a steeply patriarchal society in which alpha males strive to be the powerhouses, the conquerors of all they behold, there is no room for anyone else. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or anything in between. Technology is being used to perpetuate a thought process that has been with us. We used to think for a couple of thousand years, but we're seeing it's being pushed further and further back in time. We're now at 15,000 years or 16,000 years or maybe even 25,000 years ago. When the certain demographic finds themselves on a good wicket and nobody does anything to change it, why should they change? It is against how the brain functions. When the brain has found a way to survive most comfortably, most conveniently, most easily, it will not change its thinking unless something really dramatic happens to that brain. So, if you only have so many hours in a day in which to earn, you can never earn enough to keep up with the prices that are set in a timeless world. And so our lives spin by faster and faster as we try to squeeze more and more days into the hour, in a desperate attempt to make a living in an economy in which our time has no value. This is a race we cannot win. And if you go and look at In Time, which you can in fact do on YouTube, it is in fact one of the movies that is freely available. Why, I don't know, but there it is. That's in fact how I found it again after all these years. In Time, that concept is shown, that our hero and heroine go into Robin and Hood, Bonnie and Clyde mode, and they start stealing time and distributing time. And those that control time just simply put up the interest rate, put up prices. And so we see that today. Why are we suffering from inflation all the time? It's not because you and I are spending too much. It's because those who control fiat currency, in other words, the American state, the government of America, in cahoots with the Federal Reserve, are now in debt to the tune of $34 trillion. Now, dollars are the reserve currency of the world. It is the thing against which all other currencies measure their value. In other words, against the thing that you measure the hours of your life. And when the American government simply spends the money on war, usually, it literally creates the inflation that is devaluing your life. What to do about it? And that's what I did after I finished writing Searching for Galileo. I wrote This is the Perfect Place for Paradise, and I realized something. And In Time, Andrew Niccol's In Time, helped me see this. He said, we can, in fact, create a reward system that looks very similar to the clock on the arm of the people in this film. But it measures something completely different. It measures something of intrinsic value that cannot, in fact, be controlled by someone else, because it is, in fact, real, and it is created by every single person. And that has got to do with how we use our brains. When we use our brains in a very specific way, the result is a chemical cocktail is released by our brains into our bodies, which we can quantify. This has already been done by our wearable tech. We quantify stress. We measure the cortisol levels in our sweat. We also measure the temperature of our skin. We measure our heartbeat, and all of these things tell us when we are stressed. There is no reason whatsoever that we cannot measure other emotions in the same way. Gratitude, for example. Self-produced joy. Happiness is a thing that comes from reacting something out. Joy is something you cultivate in yourself. And you can do it anywhere, anytime. But it requires you to use your brain in a way that doesn't allow you to behave in a non-beneficial way. It doesn't make you feel you need to step on other people in order to get somewhere in life. And so in This is the Perfect Place for Paradise, I put forward a different kind of future. Clearly, I was having flashbacks from this movie and everything I'd learned for the past, when did I write this? I wrote this in 2022. So over the past 17 years, brain training, cognitive neuroscience, time, value systems, the fiat monetary system, who controls it, how our value systems are set. So all of that came together in this book, This is the Perfect Place for Paradise. And as I said, it works towards a utopian future. The thing about Andrew Niccol's work is he basically uses linear thinking. This is the technology. If we extrapolate it into the future, how will it look in the future? And it never looks good because our thought process remains the same. In this book, I'm saying to myself, how do we change how people behave without changing what they believe? So essentially, I'm looking at the situation going, what problem do we all have in common? The increasing difficulty of extracting sufficient fiat currency reward out of the system in order to be able to actually live. Our time, our lifetime has become so devalued that we can no longer work sufficient hours in order to sustain life. That is our collective problem across the globe, except for those very, very few at the very top of the pile. And what keeps them at the top of the pile? Exactly the same thing as what keeps the value system in the movie In Time. The fact that we're all working so desperately at earning fiat currency. you want to change it. You want to change what you reward, whom you reward, and how you reward. Then you change everything. And the thing is, we can. So I take the premise of the clock on the arm, the quantifier, and I change it to start quantifying beneficial behavior. And in this book, I start working on how, first of all, to do that, how to bridge the paradigm, which is always the hardest thing to do. And then how will a future look in which we're all working to be kind, honest, generous people. Because essentially, if we look at the world and we look at the value systems and the religious systems and whatnot, the foundation of all of those systems is exactly that. Be kind, be honest, be self-controlled, be generous. All of those things are contained in the things that people already believe. So what I suggest in This is the Perfect Place for Paradise is that we align the reward system with that very basic desire of all of humanity. So at the end of the, sort of nearing the end of the book, I go on to say, so they have this technology, which in the book is like one of these wearable rings. And I go on to say, by cultivating beneficial emotions, generosity, joy, love, and gratitude, I aim to make you calm, happy, and confident. And at the same time, I keep myself calm, joyful, and loving. And you do the same. All the while, the rings read the very specific chemical fingerprint of these emotions and reward us. So each of us becomes responsible for our own reward, not by what we extract from the world around us, but by what we create in ourselves and give back to the world. Your ongoing aim is to create calm and loving kindness within yourself, for yourself. And eventually this loving kindness or life force will flow through you constantly, and you will become a highly valued member within the global community. And the point here is something that you always ask yourself, so where do you start building? You start building in the place that creates these beneficial emotions by excreting the correct hormonal cocktail. And that is in your brain. We are not taught to use our brains beneficially for humanity. We are taught to use our brains beneficially to maintain the fiat economic system. Like in the movie In Time, we are taught, and our entire daily endeavor aims at getting us to work really, really hard at building a bigger and bigger prison. By changing how we reward, whom we reward, what we reward, by changing how we use our brains, we can actually, for the first time in our known history, even probably our unknown history, change the dynamic without harming anybody. In fact, by doing no harm to anybody or the planet. That sounds like a good deal to me. Maybe I should send my book to Andrew Niccol and he can make a movie about that. In the meantime, check my links. The books are available. Read them. Start joining in. It's when we all join together and start working towards a common beneficial goal that that goal comes true.